Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Weekend Bible Study. We'll finish Luke in about 3 weeks, and I'm thinking about doing a series right after Luke about the Passover, because the Passover's close upon us now. We will be by then. And so you might want to send in your Passover questions for those studies. They'll be starting right after Luke. After doing the Passover, well, my mind has been wandering around about what I need to do to kind of complete what we've got about the Bible on tape. And I'm thinking about the book of Ezekiel. I did a full-bore Ezekiel series of sermons years ago. They were on cassette. I don't think the quality of them is good enough. So anyway, and I've had some new thoughts, too, about prophecy since then. So I think I would like to do a new series on Ezekiel. We have some new questions this week, so we need to get quickly into Luke. Put some popcorn in the microwave, warm up your coffee, arrange your notes, and open your Bible to Luke 21, and let's study the Bible together. Luke 21. Jesus looked up and saw the rich men casting their gifts into the treasury. He also saw a certain poor widow casting in there 2 mites. I don't know what a mite is exactly. It's not really important. It's obvious. It's small. And he said, "Of a truth I say unto you, this poor widow has cast in more than all of them. For all these have of their abundance cast into the offering of God, but she of her poverty has cast in all the living that she had." You know, this is really one of the most profound examples in all of Jesus' teaching. It's plain enough that no one would have known the difference if that woman had not given. It wouldn't have amounted. She could have thrown I don't think they had buttons, but she could have thrown a button in there for all the difference it was going to make in the outcome of the temple treasury. The priesthood, oh my, those guys were rich enough. It's something I've thought about a lot. Jesus did not give her money back to her. He did not tell her or anyone else that they should keep what they have. He did not say there was no need for her 2 mites. You know, you might say, "Oh, that poor woman, wish she'd kept that. She needed that more than the temple treasury did. Oh, wish she hadn't given that to those wicked priests. They'll just waste it." Why didn't he say that? Now, here is one of those places where you might pause the playback and talk about this if there are a couple of you listening together, or write down your thoughts if you're alone. Then I will tell you what I think. The truth is, there was a need. Not that God needed anything from her. That's certainly not the case. But she needed to give to God. Giving, tithing, is an act of worship. It is a part of one's relationship to God, and no one should ever imagine they could take that from you. Now, here at CEM, we hope to have a budget of $1.5 million this year, with nearly half of it going into buying radio time. Now, we wouldn't miss someone's small donation, but they would miss out on feeling a part of what we're doing. So we never send anybody's money back to them saying, "Oh, you're a poor person. Why don't you just keep this?" For a while, we didn't send a receipt for small donations because it cost the amount of the donation to send the receipt back. But Faye kept after me about it, and we changed the policy. Everyone gets a receipt and a note from us these days. Why? Because it is not about the money. It's about the poor widow and about God. Everyone has a right to be a partner with God. You may not realize this, but the Greek word koinonia, which is usually translated fellowship in the New Testament, actually means partnership. You know, those of you who were taken by the Lord of the Rings trilogy should realize that. The Fellowship of the Ring was the term for a team who were on a mission together. They were partners in a mission that had been given to them. No one should be denied participation in God, in God's work, to the things God is doing, to the projects in honor of God. To Jesus, this woman had given more than anyone who passed by that day. To have returned her money would have been a humiliation to her. And he would never have thought about doing anything to humiliate this lady. For somebody like Bill Gates to give that kind of an offering, he'd have to give billions and billions of dollars and leave himself with nothing in order to reach the level that this woman gave on this day. So understand this. This has to do with a person's relationship to God, to the way they give to God, to the way they honor God with the things that they are giving. Luke 21, verse 5. As some spoke of the temple and how it was adorned with goodly stones and gifts, he said, of these things which you see here, the days will come in which there will not be left one stone on another that shall not be thrown down. And they asked him, saying, Master, when shall these things be? What sign will there be when these things shall come to pass? Now, this is some of the same material as the Sermon on the Mount. It seems to be at a different place, though, in the history of Jesus' ministry. However, I have an idea it's the same material, but the occasion was different. I have no doubt that Jesus repeated himself when different people were present. You can't get through life without saying the same thing more than once, especially if you're a teacher. I know back in the days when we didn't have tape recorders. Yeah, I'm that old. I could give a sermon again and again and again, different locations. I remember one time I gave 8 sermons in 8 days. Actually, most of them were the same sermon because I'd given it in one location and flew to another. Now, it's a challenge, though, nowadays, because people are right there. When you give it, they have heard it already on tape, and you can't repeat yourself again. That's what I'm trying to say. So I think that Jesus, since he didn't have tape recorders, obviously said the same thing over and over again in different locations to different people. So he went on to say, Now take heed that you be not deceived, for many are going to come in my name, saying, I am Christ, and the time draws near. Go not after them. Now there's an interesting ambiguity in this verse, and it arises from the fact that the word Christ is not in the text. It's supplied by the translators. You'll notice if you're reading the King James Version, it's probably in italics, which means the word is not there. It's what the translator understood. I have heard people interpret this as, well, there are going to be people who come who say that Jesus is the Christ, but that they are deceivers. I don't think so. The NIV, the New American Standard Bible, the NRSV have it right. Here's the way roughly, this is what NIV says. Watch out that you're not deceived. For many will come in my name, claiming, I am he, and the time is near. Do not follow them. Actually, even the word he is not in the text. Whoever this is uses the same word Jesus used when he called himself I am. So I take this as a reference to false Christs, which Jesus said elsewhere would happen. They would exist. Many will come in my name, claiming, I am, and the time is near. Don't follow them. But when you shall hear of wars and commotions, don't be terrified. These things must come to pass, but the end is not by and by. Then said he unto them, Nation shall rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom. Great earthquakes shall be in divers places, and famines and pestilence and fearful signs, and great signs shall there be from heaven. This is very similar to what he said in the Olivet prophecy when he laid all this stuff out for them, that all this stuff is going to happen, signs and so forth in the heavens. But the end is not yet. Because he goes on here to say, But before all these they will lay their hands on you and persecute you, delivering you up to the synagogues and into prisons, being brought before kings and rulers for my name's sake. It shall turn to you for a testimony. Settle it therefore in your hearts. Okay, make up your mind about this. Not to meditate before what you shall answer. This will be very hard to do. You will lie awake at night anticipating questions, imagining your answers once the pressure begins to build. Make up your mind to the fact that your answer will be given to you at the moment you need it, not before. So all this stuff that you're coming up at night, all the dreaming you're doing, all the imaginations you're thinking through your way through at this time are all in vain. Nothing will come of them those are not the questions you will be asked, and those aren't the answers you will give. It's as simple as that. For I will give you, Jesus said, a mouth and wisdom, which all of your adversaries will not be able to gainsay or resist. Now, isn't that something? You're going to actually be in the same position Jesus was, and you'll have the answers he gives you so that people cannot argue with you. You will be betrayed both by parents and brothers, kinfolks, friends, and some of you they shall even cause to be put to death. Yep, you got to realize this. Having too good an argument can get you killed. It nearly got Paul killed on more than one occasion, and a lot of people, frankly, in this situation will die as a witness of God against these people. Frankly, the fact that no Christian in this country has been killed in a long time just may mean that we're being too timid in speaking to public issues. Might be time to think about repenting of that. You shall be hated of all men for my name's sake, but there shall not a hair of your head perish. Even if you're killed? Well, I guess so, because that's what he's telling us. He said they can kill the body. They can't prevent the resurrection. In your patience, he says, possess you your life. So, I guess we can just realize we're going to have to go through some of this stuff, but even when they kill us, they can't get rid of us, because God can and will bring us back. Jesus went on in verse 20, When you shall see Jerusalem compassed with armies, know that the desolation thereof is near. Then let them which are in Judea flee into the mountains. Let those who are in the midst of it get out. Let not them that are in the countries go back into it. For these are the days of vengeance, that all things which are written may be fulfilled. Wow. You know, this flight to a place of safety that he's talking about here is not American Christians fleeing to Petra in Jordan. That was taught by a group of people who believed Petra was the place of safety. This has only to do with those who are in Judea. Did you catch it? Let those who are in Judea flee into the mountains. It has only to do with those. But then he goes on to say, Woe to them that are with child, and those that give suck. In those days there shall be great distress in the land, and wrath upon this people. They will fall by the edge of the sword. They shall be led away captive into all nations, and Jerusalem shall be trodden down of the Gentiles until the times of the Gentiles be fulfilled. Now, you will get a wide variety of interpretations of this verse. I haven't done it, but I'll bet if you go up on the internet and you do a search on times of the Gentiles, you will get pages and pages and pages of theories about what that means. This, however, is one of the reasons I think there is yet a future Holocaust. They shall fall by the edge of the sword. They'll be carried away captive. They'll be stuffed into boxcars and carried off and put into gas chambers and crematoriums again. You think about it, it's happened before, and there's every reason to think from prophecy it's going to happen again. Daniel and John's revelation come into play with the words of Jesus to suggest that even though this has been fulfilled in type in the past, it is going to happen again. Why would I say that? Well, listen to what Jesus goes on to say. There shall be signs in the sun, and in the moon, and in the stars, and upon the earth, distress of nations, with perplexity, the sea and the waves roaring, men's hearts failing them for fear, and looking after those things which are coming on the earth, for the powers of the heavens shall be shaken. This is really a description of something. You almost have to go to science fiction to find this. Then they shall see the Son of Man coming in a cloud with power and great glory. And when these things begin to come to pass, look up, lift up your heads, your redemption is close. But the question, when, hangs in the air. Well, you know, when you read through this, you have all this stuff about wars, you have the times of the Gentiles, you have going captive into all nations. Just before, the sign of the Son of Man in heaven, Him coming here in clouds with power and great glory, Jesus is back. So, I think we've got another round of this to look forward to. He spoke to them a parable, and he said, Behold the fig tree, all trees. When they shoot forth, you see and know of your own selves that summer is nigh at hand. You start seeing the little green things start showing the end of the branches. You know, hey, summer is coming at last. So likewise you, when you see these things come to pass, know the kingdom of God is near at hand. Verily I say unto you, this generation shall not pass away till all be fulfilled. Heaven and earth shall pass away, my words will not pass away. Now you can see the problem this presents, and why some people think the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 A.D. fulfilled the prophecy. There are those who believe that the surrounding of Jerusalem by the Roman armies, the fall of the city, the destruction of it, the laying of the temple level with the ground, fully completed Jesus' prophecies of both the Olivet prophecy and of this one that he gave here, perhaps even in the temple. Really. But Jesus did not come. Actually, these things were fulfilled, but only in type, because the sign of the coming of the Son of Man did not follow. Now, most prophecy sits in the Bible in type and antitype. Brace yourself, because the antitype is really going to be something. It's horrifying to read, frankly, of what happened in Jerusalem when it fell in 70 A.D. No worse, of course, than what happened when it fell when Nebuchadnezzar took it. No worse than some of the stuff that happened when the Assyrians besieged Jerusalem and people were eating their own children. It's bad, but it isn't anything for what is coming. Take heed to yourself, Jesus said. You watch out, be aware, lest at any time your hearts be overcharged with surfeiting, he means eating, and drunkenness, the cares of this life, so the day comes upon you unawares. Oh, I could see how easy that is. You know, we live such busy, fulfilled, full lives. We don't have time for anything. Some people work 2, some people even work 3 jobs, in their full-time jobs almost. I don't know when they sleep. But they seem to be working every waking hour of their lives, trying to get ahead, trying to make the car payment, trying to make the house payment, trying to save for their kids to go to college. They just work. And then there are other people who just play. And there's no time to think about God. There's no time to think about life. So eating and drinking and the worries about living can come upon you so much that the day you just miss completely the fact that the trees are starting to go green. As a snare, Jesus said, it will come upon everyone that dwells upon the face of the whole earth. You know how a snare works? Well, you're walking along in the woods one day, and all of a sudden you step into a trap on the ground, a noose trapped on the ground, and you trigger it, and the next thing you know, you're hanging upside down by a snare. If it's not a person, it could be a rabbit or what have you. It's the way it goes. And he says you better watch. You'd better keep some time in your life. You better not let yourself get so preoccupied, because it will happen fast. Isaiah, in one case, draws the analogy. He said, this prophecy shall be to you as the swelling of a wall, that when it breaks, it comes suddenly in an instant. You know, you can take a book and put it on a flat surface table, and then slowly begin to tilt that table up. It is almost impossible for you to, if you do it slow enough, to predict the moment that that book will begin to slide and will slide off onto the floor. The same is true of a brick wall or a retaining wall that's beginning to swell because of water building up behind the wall. You can sit there in its shadow day after day after day and nothing happens, and you won't know the moment that that wall is going to come down around your head and shoulders. He said, this is the way it's going to be. It'll be a snare. It's going to be like a wall. You're going to have a level of alertness and preparedness that you can maintain. Watch, therefore, he said, and pray always, that you may be accounted worthy to escape all these things that shall come to pass, and to stand before the Son of Man. The thing I think about when I read these words is not so much that we need to be studying the Bible for prophecy, that if we can just spot the things that the Bible says will happen in sequence just before the return of Christ, that we will then be ready. I don't think that's his point. Take heed that lest at any time your hearts be overcharged with surfeiting and drunkenness and the cares of this life. It's going to come like a snare upon you. Watch and pray always, that you may be accounted worthy to escape these things. Do you realize that Lot had no idea the moment that the fire was going to fall on Sodom? Hadn't got a clue. He didn't, not that he disbelieved the angels that had come to him, it's just that he had no idea of the time, and he was standing around waiting for his sons-in-law to show up. Didn't come. Finally, the angels took him and his family by the hand and led them out of the city, pushed them down the trail, and says, "Get going and don't look back." Why did they do that? Because Lot was a righteous, clean-living man who followed God, and God got him out of there. This is the way you have to live your life. You can't predict it. You can't know when it's coming. You cannot get yourself ready for it. It will come upon you when you haven't even got a clue. But God will take care of you if you are living a life worthy of Him. You don't have to know. He'll get you out. Well, in the daytime, Jesus was teaching in the temple, and at night he went out and stayed in the mount that is called the Mount of Olives. And every morning people would come early to him in the temple to hear what he had to say. You know, you think, oh, I wish I could have done that. I wish I could have been there. I wish I could have heard him. Well, we know what he said because Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John wrote it all down for us. And frankly, if you won't listen to the testimony of these men, if you won't arrange your life by what they said, you wouldn't change if you were right there at Jesus' feet, hearing the timbre of his voice. Think about that one for a bit. Paul writes from Tyler, Texas. Hello, Paul. I guess you're a neighbor of ours down here. You should drop by sometime. Paul asks, when Jesus is asked, David then calls him Lord. Actually, I think Jesus asked this. David calls him Lord. How then is he his son? He says Jesus did not answer the question. Well, actually, Jesus asked the question. Paul wants to know, was he avoiding the question or by not answering, saying that it was a silly question to ask, applying, don't answer a fool according to his folly, not saying he's calling one a fool, or is there some other reason? The context in Matthew is probably the most helpful. Here it is from Matthew 22, verse 42. Jesus was saying, what think ye of Christ? Whose son is he? Well, they said to him, he's the son of David. And Jesus said to them, how then does David in spirit call him Lord, saying, the Lord said unto my Lord, sit on my right hand till I make your enemies your footstool? If David called him his Lord, how is he his son? And no man was able to answer him a word, neither dared any man from that day forward ask him any questions. He didn't ask the question to answer it. He asked it to shut up his critics, and it was effective. You see, what he said in this passage is the Messiah was David's Lord. And in the Old Testament, who was David's Lord? It was Yahweh, consistently, everywhere, and all the time. How then, he is saying, can the Messiah, the Christ, be Yahweh, David's Lord, if he is a son of David? Well, how indeed. This is another one of Jesus' claims to divinity. It's made obliquely because not everyone was ready to hear that particular answer at this time. But it's another case, and they're shot all through, particularly John, but here's one out of Matthew, where Jesus is actually laying the predicate for the fact that he is God, that he did pre-exist his human birth, that he was the one that actually spoke to Moses from the burning bush. Kind of sobering to think about, isn't it? Okay, Christy writes from Ohio. I just listened to the January 23rd weekend Bible study and really enjoyed it. However, I have always been under the impression that if a nuclear bomb hits the USA, whether it's New York City or Washington, D.C., it will affect every living thing on the planet. Well, I suppose at some degree it would, but not in the disastrous way I was talking about. She went on to write, you stated that you were worried that about the people in New York and Washington, D.C., and that maybe they could flee to White House, Texas, and they could find a place to live there. My friend, I hate to tell you, if nuclear weapons of mass destruction hit our homeland, White House, Texas will not be exempt. I'm sure you already know this, but your comment regarding it surprised me. Well, I'm not sure where the misunderstanding arises, but what Christie is describing is what they tell us we would face if we faced all-out nuclear attack from the Soviet Union. And in that, there's a lot to say for what she's saying. If that happens, she's right enough, although the devastation from nuclear attack, frankly, is somewhat overblown. I saw a map once of Pakistan and India. You know, both of these nations have nuclear weapons, and there's a lot of fear that as tension begins to build between them, that sooner or later they'll break out into absolute nuclear war. Well, what they showed on the map was what things would look like if Pakistan launched every nuclear weapon they are known to have at India. And they plotted them out on the map, not only in the place of the impact, but in the areas of fallout. And when you look at the map, you realize that while it would be devastating for India in many ways, there would be parts of India that were not directly affected by it at all, because they could not blanket or carpet bomb India into non-existence, even with nuclear weapons. It's just too big a country and too many people. They might take... Actually, looking at the map, I would guess that maybe it would get 10% of the Indian population is all. And I think the pattern would be similar here, although what you probably would see here if it was coming from the Soviet Union would be the really big fusion bombs. Another thing that could happen, which would really affect all of us, although it wouldn't kill all that many people, is the high air burst that's designed to give an electromagnetic pulse, which actually fries every electrical circuit in the country. Now, if you don't think that would change our way of life, think again. But that wasn't what I was talking about. What I was talking about was not all-out nuclear war. It was something like a terrorist-planted suitcase nuke, suitcase-sized bomb, which would actually have less yield probably than the Hiroshima bomb. Or perhaps what they call a dirty bomb, that is a nuclear blast, not a nuclear blast, but a regular explosive blast that spreads deadly radiation over a broad area. It should be clear to everyone by now that terrorism is not about strategic bombing. It's about killing people. Now, can you imagine the damage that they could have done to our economy if they had, what they have altogether, 5 airplanes or something? They don't know if they got it, everything. I've kind of lost track of it. It's been so long now. If they had taken every one of those airplanes into a refinery, do you have any idea how much damage that would have done to our economy? Man, it would be terrible. It would actually have been worse than what we're going through right now. But they're not interested in that. They're interested in terror, and that's about killing people. And New York and Washington are their preferred targets. That's the spirit in which I was talking about this. All-out nuclear war, all bets are off, although, frankly, I would sure still rather be here than where there was any big city. You know, and I've worried about this at times in the past, and pull out a map of Texas and look at the prevailing winds and wondering what things would be like here in Tyler if they let off one of those really big bombs in Houston, which Houston would be a strategic target because of the ship channel there. Oh, well, this is a pretty sobering subject, and maybe we should get on to the next question today. Michael writes, I think from Dallas. He said, in regard to Genesis 1 and understanding it, to me it was once pointed out that the scholars who have produced the NIV translation found that the rendering of the first 2 sentences of Genesis have a very profound, acceptable, and alternate translation from the original Hebrew to English than we see, for example, in the interlinear translation. Now, Michael is drawing attention to the NIV as opposed to the King James Version. Actually, no, as opposed to the interlinear translation. I don't have his interlinear. Genesis 1 says this, in the beginning God created the heaven and the earth. Period. That's where it ends. And the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. Now, one thing you need to understand, there's no punctuation in Hebrew. There's no punctuation in Greek. There isn't any period, absence of period, semicolon, comma, or anything else. So, but the word "and" there might be misleading. Here's how the NIV translates it. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. Now the earth was formless and empty, darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. Michael notes the period at the end of verse 1, saying, this period has titanic significance, as it also appears in the King James, whereas in the interlinear Bible, a semicolon is used, and the word "and" follows, making an ongoing description of the first day. Well, hardly anybody thinks that anymore. That's been out of the picture for a long time. And the earth was without form and empty. The NIV and the King James start a new sentence, okay? We understand that. With the period, the significance is totally different. The time between the creation of the heavens and the earth sentence and then the next sentence, since not specified, can easily be accepted as a passage of billions of years. Why not? Well, why not indeed? What Michael is describing is commonly called the gap theory. There is a gap between verse 1 and verse 2. And since you're probably sitting there with your computer on, all you got to do is pull up your search engine and look up, quote, the gap theory, end quote, and you will get more than you ever wanted to know about the gap theory. It's been advanced in the past as a means of understanding how the earth can be billions of years old when Genesis says it was created 6,000 years ago in 6 days. Okay, of course, Genesis doesn't say that the earth was created 6,000 years ago. It does seem to say it was created in 6 days. However, some time ago, I don't remember what I was reading or when it was, I came across an expression about a description of the first chapter of Genesis that called it the creation hymn. And all of a sudden, the light went on in my room. I thought, oh, I see what Moses did. And it answers another question. People want to know why we have two descriptions of the creation of man. The first was poetic. And if you read the first chapter of Genesis with this in mind, you take your freshman English class of where you study poetry, imagery, and all the things connected with poetry, you should spot it there because of the patterns, the emphasis, the rhythm, and the repetition of all the phrases that go there. This thing reads like a poem or a hymn, a song, and I suddenly realized, well, of course. What Moses, you have to understand one interesting thing about this. There was not one word of what we have as the Bible that was ever written down on paper until Moses came along. Not a word. Everything before that was oral tradition. Okay, how do you maintain your oral traditions? Well, you do them by memorizing. And what's the best way to memorize stuff? You create little songs in which you help people to memorize the things. For example, how do you teach children the books of the New Testament? Got a little song. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, Acts and a letter to the Romans, and so you go. And kids learn that song, and from there on in their life, they're able to remember all of the words of the New Testament. I think what Moses did here, he took the commonly known song of creation and wrote it down for the first time as his introduction to what was to follow. If you got my 3 books, you'll notice at the beginning of each chapter, there's a section in italics right at the top. In one of them, I cite a poem by James Weldon Johnson titled The Creation. I take a verse, a stanza out of that poem, and I use it as my introduction and go right on. Now, in my layout, I can block it off, put it in italics, a different font, and you can tell clearly it's not part of the text. Moses did not have a word processor, and so consequently, he just wrote from column to column, from margin to margin, and that's just the way they did those things. I think it's very evident when you read it. What you have got is not a literal description of the creation of the heavens and the earth, but a marvelous poem. And the point of the whole thing is God did all this stuff. He did it His way and His time. And the pattern we are to look at and understand is the 6 days of creation and the 7th day, which is the Sabbath. And that's how we establish our tradition. it does. You'd run into some terrible problems if you really let your kids grow up with a literal interpretation of Genesis 1 and 2. They're going to run into a real problem when they get into science classrooms, because there is hard evidence that it's not quite like Archbishop Usher thought it was when he laid out 6,000 years and 6 days of creation as he did it. So, the answer is often given that the earth was created billions of years ago. Then it became chaotic and confusion about the result of the great war between Satan and God. That's the way Michael, I think, sees it. The next sentence, he says, in the NIV, notes that the word was can also in the Hebrew serve as the word became. So instead of reading the world was formless and empty or void, it could read the world became formless and empty or void. Now he goes on to say, to me this changes everything, in that from the second sentence on, we are actually reading an account of God recreating the earth which had become formless and void. Yeah, that's a common interpretation of this passage. It's, like I say, if you go back and do a little research on the gap theory, you'll find it again and again and again in some of the literature. Even modern-day science concurs insofar as there is evidence that something cataclysmic happened in the prehistoric planet. Michael says that in his question. This then easily fits that God in all his power could reset the stage in literal 6 days. Why not? He is God. Oh, I don't have any argument with that. He certainly could do it, but it's really, I'm not sure it's even necessary, and it's not without its problems. Michael says this does not change the radiocarbon dating of rocks or anything. There is no deception of making things look older than they are. The earth, is just reset. Now, something generally like that is possible. It's plausible. But there are still some huge problems to be dealt with. We have had the old earth, young earth debate on our forum several times over the years, and there are numerous websites that wrestle with the issue. One of the themes that we have developed is that God has two witnesses to his creation. One of them is the Bible, the other is the creation itself, and neither of them lie to us. They're both telling us the absolute truth, and if they don't look like they're saying the same thing, it's our problem, and we need to sort it out. It's not the Bible, and it's not science. Okay, that's it for this week. I've enjoyed talking with you about the Bible, and I look forward to next week. Until then, send your questions, your remarks to me at ron@borntowin.net. Until next week.